My style's definitely been influenced by all the places I've been. I think too though that it took me some time to figure out really what my style was. I really appreciate streetwear. I enjoy it. I think typically what I wear is along those lines of just like streetwear clothing. I think what inspired it was just me personally finding what I feel works for me, and also just like little things here and there of the different places that I've been. I'm Lakota Sioux, and I'm enrolled in the Yankton Sioux tribe of South Dakota. And my wife is from the same people. She's Oglala and Kuwichasha. Despite that, she grew up on the reservation. From preschool through high school, I actually lived in Oahu in Hawaii. And we had moved there for my parents' work. And it was a great experience. It gave me a very diverse upbringing. I definitely still have my connections to my relatives that live back in South Dakota on the reservation. But I had a chance to be exposed to a lot of different kinds of people from different backgrounds. Hawaiian people and Polynesian people are just the best. I mean, I have so much love for all my Hawaiian friends and all my Polynesian friends, and I think growing up there benefited me a lot. And then when I was leaving high school, I moved to Montana for college, so I headed back to the Midwest. And I lived there for 5 or 6 years. And then I was just living on my own and going to school and working odd jobs and things like that. And then once I decided to really pursue fighting and I realized I had the ability and I had the drive to try and make it happen, we came here to California. Yeah, so the big reason we came to California was specifically for me to be able to pursue fighting. When I was a kid growing up, I think in Oahu, fighting is such a big part of the culture there. I always trained. I always had friends that trained or fought, and I was training with Haru Shimanishi with HMC when I was in Hawaii. And then I would also periodically go to Hybrid House, which is in Kailua. Leaving my home gyms to then go to college and go to school, I had a very hard time finding high-level training when I was living in the Midwest. And I think just where I was at and also like having to work and go to school, it wasn't as much as a focus as I wish it was. So that was tough, but I had really close friends of mine that also are passionate about fighting and mixed martial arts and Muay Thai and kickboxing. So we would train at home. We would go to people's garages and hit pads and spar, and that's kind of how we would get our reps in. When I came here, I was fortunate enough to find Fight Academy. And of course, different cultures, each gym has a different culture. I think Savant has done such a great job of cultivating a really positive, welcoming, supportive culture here at Fight Academy, that it was just a really easy kind of seamless transition. And I came here without knowing anybody, without having any, family really or friends. It was just me and my wife. I just came in the gym and told them I wanted to fight, and I paid my dues to an extent, and I was prepared to do that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, when I was looking for a place to train, I wasn't there for the relationships and I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to be around people that I felt were better than me, that could push me to improve and be better, each day that I came in to get work. And I was just lucky. I was lucky that I have people that can push me to be better, and I also have good, great friends that I've made, along the way. And it's such a great culture here that it was the best of both worlds. So that's kind of my ideal spot, is just anywhere that I'm not the best guy in the room. Anywhere that I know I'm surrounded by people that are gonna push me to improve. It does take time. Typically you're not gonna find out right away. Sometimes right away. You can walk into the room and you can see where everyone's at and you can get a feel for the coaches and you kind of have an idea. But for the most part, I'd say you have to give it some time to kind of develop. And for me, the way I've always looked at it is just trial by fire. When I was a little kid, my coaches would throw me in with guys that were actively competing, that were adults, and I was a teenager or a young teen. And I would spar and get work with guys that were fighting at an amateur level or a pro level. And, you got your ass beat, and that was the deal. You're gonna sink or swim. And so I think I took that mentality going abroad and checking out different places across the country and training in different spots where it's I'm gonna pull up, state my intentions of what I'm trying to achieve and what my goals are, and then just, start grinding. Put my head down, start grinding. Show up to the classes, be consistent, show my ability, and eventually you get put in a position where you have to kind of, prove yourself that you're there and that you're there to compete. If you meet some resistance, and you can really see like, okay, like this is where I'm at and this is where these guys are and I'm trying to get to that level, that's where you need to be. Part of it is just natural, you know? I think part of it's just in my blood. It was always a part of me. I think a lot of our people can relate that that's a part of them as well. You know, that's something in them that just fighting speaks to them, you know, and it's part of who we are. Ever since I was little, I was drawn to it. I would always watch combat sports, boxing, MMA with my parents. And also too, like I said, I think a big contributing factor was growing up where I grew up, fighting being so popular. And you know, even seeing guys like when they were still actively competing and doing well, you know, BJ Penn in 2008, when I was 8 years old, you know, he was still doing his thing. And now we have Max Holloway and we have, you know, those types of people that are at a high level. Yeah, so I think growing up in Oahu, where fighting is such a big part of the culture, you're accustomed to everyone training, everyone, you know, fighting. And if they're not fighting competitively, you're fighting, you know, at school, you're fighting in your backyard, you're fighting with your friends, you know, and that was something we grew up with. And so for me, it was kind of like, this is part of life. Am I gonna be good at it and start like beating people's ass, or am I gonna get my ass beat, you know? And so that pushed me to get into the gym. And then as I started training and I had people around me telling me, you know, you have some real potential, you could do something with this, you should consider being more committed. I took that seriously and I was inspired by that. And so I committed myself to training. Definitely where I grew up. Yeah, I mean, I think as an adult, hopefully, not for all people, but for most people, as you get older, that time in your life kind of starts to fade away. I know the more I was training in the gym, the less I got into fights outside of the gym too. But definitely growing up is when I would get into the most street fights, or like I said, even just mutual agreement fights with my friends. You know, I mean, there were a lot of times like we're all hanging out, someone's uncle has a pair of boxing gloves and you just lace them up and they want to see you fight, you know? And so that was part of our lifestyle. And I think people are so game and they're so about it, they're down. They're gonna meet you halfway. You know, when I was a kid, it was very clear where it's like, okay, we're gonna meet up and we're gonna scrap and we're gonna get down, and afterwards we'll shake hands and we'll part ways and everything will be cool. You know, and things have changed since, but that's how we grew up. You know, that's the understanding, the mutual understanding that we had. You know, we're gonna pull up, we're gonna fight, and then we'll squash it. You know, and that was my experience with getting into fights in school or, you know, in the street when I was a kid. Coming from our background also, I think even within your family, there's an expectation that if someone steps to you, that you don't back down. You know, I think it was impressed upon most indigenous people, most native kids, and also Polynesian kids. Like, if someone disrespects you or if someone wants to fight you, you have to not be a coward. You know, you have to stand up for yourself and you have to be willing to meet them halfway, you know. And I always tried my best to carry myself respectfully and, you know, treat people, you know, with respect and not to instigate problems. But if someone were to come to you with a problem, you're gonna settle it, you know, and that was kind of the mentality growing up. Yeah, it feels great. So my daughter's 2 weeks old now. She was just born, and it's amazing. You know, you can't put into words what it feels like to be a parent. When you're not a dad, when you're not a parent, you think it's kind of like cliche or like corny when people talk about like the overwhelming love that you feel for them and that there's nothing like it. You can't compare it to anything. It's 100% true. When you see them and you look at their face and, you know, you see them for the first time, the overwhelming amount of love that you have for them is just crazy. There's nothing like it, you know, and you would give anything for your kids and it just fills you up. You know, it really does. And I think my wife and I both had that experience. And, you know, fortunately, like, we have a very stable home and relationship, and to share that with each other, of bringing our daughter into the world and seeing her and just the amount of love that it filled us up with is just, there's nothing like it. You know, it's hard to say. I mean, a lot of people tell you that when you're a dad, it gives you a new sense of motivation with fighting. I think I was always very self-motivated when it came to competing. I haven't gone through a fight camp yet with my daughter here. And so we'll see. We'll see if I feel different. You know, I think I want to keep separate my life as a fighter and a competitor and my life as a dad. You know, it's very important to me, and I'm very grateful that I'm in a position where I can be present and very available in my daughter's life. But I don't necessarily want to mix the two. You know, I think I want to keep my home life at home and me as a fighter as two separate things. And so we'll see how it affects me. You know, I'm not sure yet. We'll see how things progress. I know for sure that you want to make them proud. You know, you have a feeling that you need to give them a source of pride in seeing what you do. And so I'm sure that'll drive me to win, but I always wanted to win. You know, I always had that drive in me to be successful and to make something of this. And so I'm not sure how much it'll change, but time will tell. I wouldn't be opposed to my daughter fighting. That's not something I would ever push her to do. You know, I would never pressure her to fight or compete. I think with what we do, you can't really push someone or force someone into doing this. And I don't think it's a good idea either to make someone feel as though they have to fight. I think to be successful, you do have to be passionate about it to an extent. If she really wanted to pursue fighting, I would support her, but I would never try to pressure her into fighting. Obviously the sport's dangerous and it would be hard to see my daughter fighting, you know, but if it was something that she loved, I can relate to that, because this is something for me personally that I'm fortunate that I don't have to do it, but I want to do it, you know, and if she had that same drive, I wouldn't deprive her of that. Training is mandatory. I think I'm going to require her that she trains just for self-defense and discipline and the lessons that the sport can teach you, but I wouldn't ever make her fight. I think everyone that competes or trains probably has stories about people coming through, like quote unquote like dojo storming, or people that want to like prove a point or they have an ego. And it's not to say that I was very good at the time, because I wasn't. You know, especially compared to now, and I'm always on a journey of improving, I was not a good fighter. But I do believe that there's a significant separation between people that train and people that don't train. And typically when you have someone come in that just has a big ego, that has a point to prove, but they don't have any idea on how to fight, they're gonna get hurt. I've been put in positions where you're kind of forced to hurt that person. That's never the goal, but it happens. So there's so many stories. So since I've been in California and since I've trained at Fight Academy, I've never seen this happen. But before, you know, when I was living in the Midwest, and I think combat sports aren't as popular, or there's not as much of a regional presence the sport has, you run into it more. So yeah, I've had guys come in and try to like actually fight, you know, where they come to spar and they get their ego hurt and then they want to fight you for real. They get fucked up. They get beat up, you know, and they're kind of asking for it, but they get what they ask for. I think like one story in particular, a guy came in, he had a big chip on his shoulder and kind of wanted to prove something, and it was a sparring day. Me and him were sparring, and man, he was just swinging for the fences. I mean, he was just really trying to take my head off. And I drilled him with a couple like hard low kicks, and he felt them, you know, and I was like, hey man, like relax. You know, I told him, I warned him, I was like, relax, this is just sparring. And he kind of started talking his shit, took it personal, and you know, was saying he really wanted to fight. So I'm about it when it comes to that. And I was like, all right, man, well, let's fight then. I dropped him with a body shot, and like, I'm not proud of it, but so I dropped the guy with a body shot, and then when he was on the ground, I head kicked him. So I put him out, and you know, my friends were kind of like, hey bro, chill, and they, you know, started separating us at that point. And I just told the guy like, yo, pack up your shit and get out of here, you know? Like, this isn't the place for that. If you want to fight, like, catch me outside after this, you know? Like, if you want to fight for real, you know, I'll see you in the parking lot, you know? And he didn't come back after that. I think it's both, you know? I think it's both. I think definitely, like I said, like, it's part of who we are. You know, it's a warrior culture, and we come from warriors, and that is in you from birth, you know, and I think that fire to compete and that fire to fight is just in all of us. Generationally, it's something that exists in all of our people. And then as far as growing up where I grew up, I know for a fact too that Polynesian people and Hawaiian people, similar to our people, also have that warrior culture, that warrior background, and so that's a part of them too. And I think with my background and who I am, it was complemented by a lot of my friends and, you know, their background and how they were brought up. So I think it's definitely both that contribute to it, for sure. For me personally, I know I'm a better person when I'm training and I'm competing. You know, I think when I was young, I really needed that outlet. And maturing as a person and becoming an adult, that has calmed down a little bit, but it's still a part of who I am. you know, and I know like I see the difference in myself when I'm training consistently and when I have an outlet versus when I don't, you know, and that's part of the driving factor. You know, I think also too, as a fan of the sport and someone that just loves watching and, you know, participating in combat sports, that's part of it too. You know, I think I just have such a love for the game that I would always want to be involved in some way. You know, and at my age right now, I have an opportunity to make a run at things, you know, and so I don't want to regret looking back and say, well, what if I tried, you know, what if I took that chance and tried to go professional or tried to make a run at this? I'm gonna find out, you know, I'm gonna find out. And when I feel like I've exhausted that, then I'll stop and, you know, who knows? I'll keep training casually, start coaching, you know, I'll have some type of role, whether it's as a fan or a coach or a fighter. I'll have some type of, there's gonna be a space in my life that's occupied by combat sports. Yeah, I don't wanna, I mean, I'll never say never. I would definitely, at some point in life, I might consider it. But right now, I love Muay Thai, I love kickboxing, and that's what I'm passionate about, and so that's the lane that I'm gonna pursue. I think this goes back to an earlier question that I kind of skipped, but the reason why I gravitated towards Muay Thai and kickboxing is because honestly, I just do not like grappling, and I never did. I think to me, I always enjoyed the striking aspect, you know, and I always enjoyed the idea of we're gonna get in there and it's gonna be what it is and like let things fall where they may, but we're gonna stand toe to toe and we're gonna see who's the better man, you know? And I never cared for wrestling, I never cared for jiu-jitsu. Because of my kind of lack of interest in grappling, it pushed me to just improve specifically on my striking. And kind of as a kid through that journey of working on my striking exclusively, you know, when it came time to compete, it was kind of a clear, you know, lane that I was gonna compete in Muay Thai as opposed to mixed martial arts. Because if I ever did transition into MMA, then I understand fully, like, it would be an absolute requirement that I have to work on wrestling and I have to work on jiu-jitsu. Everything I know about wrestling at this point is just from being a fan of the sport. Like, it's just from playing video games and watching UFC. But yeah, as far as like grappling and jiu-jitsu, I don't have any formal like training or experience with it. But like I said, I never say never. You know, I mean, who knows? Like maybe in a few years or, you know, later down the line, I'll get offered an MMA fight and I want to try it. And if that's the case, then I'll start dedicating my time to working on those things, you know? Don't take exhibition fights in sketchy places, you know? Don't do like smokers right now. I think the other advice I'd give myself, I think this is the real advice. The real advice I would tell myself at 18 would be, you're good enough and you should try. You know, I think I waited a few years to make that move to actually start pursuing combat sports. And I wish I made that move 2 years ago, you know, or I wish I made that move, you know, 4 or 5 years ago instead of 2 years ago. You know, I think it would have been so nice to have that extra experience and that extra time working with high-level coaching and, you know, high-level training partners. But at the same time, I wouldn't change any of it for the world. You know, I mean, I met my wife, we have our beautiful daughter. I've made some of my closest friends, you know, prior to moving here. And so I wouldn't want to change my trajectory, and I'm still young and I'm planning on being super active fighting. You know, I'm trying to fight 4 or 5 times a year. But I think, yeah, my advice to my younger self would be, you have the potential, you know, take the leap, take that chance. Go somewhere where you can actually make a run at this. I just know that if I started a little sooner, I would just have that many more fights by now, and, you know, I'd be making that leap or making that jump to be a professional sooner. Everything works out the way it does for a reason, you know, so I wouldn't change any of it, but I think that would be my advice. At the time when I was doing them, I didn't have quality training, and I had like what little experience I had from being a kid, and I had no coaches, I had no, you know what I mean, I was pulling up with my friend. You know, we're in these kind of like, we're fighting in humble places, you know, I'll put it that way. I just don't think it was a good showcase of my potential and who I am, you know, and I think if I just waited until I was in a position where I had like real coaches and like high-level training partners, that I would have better showcasing of my abilities then. You know, I think instead of doing those like smokers and exhibitions at 18, if I had made the jump or I had made the move and started, you know, with a real camp and actually trying to fight, I'd probably get dialed in more, and I would have taken those same experiences, but just they would have been a little bit more beneficial. You know, I think that's what it is.